In this video, I'm completing the cycle on the €1 properties in Sicily, and essentially I would want to do a conclusion on this mini series because I would want to wrap up different threads. And essentially, first of all, I would like to remind that essentially this is Italy, so that there are differences, especially you are not coming from Italy itself, and as much as we think of Italy as a Western country, it has its own national character, its own way of doing things, such as my property search was longer than expected, and there were many delays, there were many things maybe miscommunicated on my side, or maybe on the side of those who were doing that search for me. So that one needs to understand better the context. And then once again, this is southern Italy, so that some people in northern Italy would look down on people from southern Italy. And I think that is maybe also what has been a factor, so that there are regional differences, and even though, let's say, a property firm or, let's say, law firm can have its offices both in Rome and in, let's say, in Sicily, somewhere, let's say, Palermo, but it would still be negotiating in its operations with those differences as a team, as a company. Let's say if somebody does a property search, let's say in a particular spot in Sicily, then he or she will have to eventually travel there and to do, let's say, some on-site visits, and maybe do a short list or a long list of properties, which could be of actually investment value, and so that, or let's say, over value to be purchased in the first place. So that I would say that one should not underestimate how difficult the process is and how much time it can take. In other words, we think that a lot of things are let's say, online already, or we think that we can do that as well as somebody else, but without local knowledge, without things to take into account, anything that we don't exactly how should I put it, properly estimate the amount of trouble we can be getting ourselves into by buying a property. And I did a mistake like that myself, and a lot of things were only revealed to me after the fact, so that at the stage of purchase, even if there are many grave issues, even if there are things in the context which I overlooked, that will come back to haunt you one way or another. If you made the wrong choice, this is it. You lost money, you lost time, opportunities elsewhere for the use of money, such as the investment opportunities, etc., etc. So that part of experience has been also very important for me when I stopped the process, because I thought, okay, maybe my money can do better elsewhere. So that even stopping mid-flight is better than maybe let's say, maybe going through with the deal, because essentially you are on a hook for, let's say, legal fees, for the fees for the registration of the deal, and then you will be responsible for local taxes, and they're very considerable in the southern Europe, so that it is like, let's say, electricity fee, maybe water bill, local government bill, etc., etc. All that adds up. So that at the moment you buy something and you become a taxation resident of Italy, and I think the same thing is going to be the case in Spain, in Portugal, etc., etc. So that one should take that into account, and then once again, in terms of investment, it could be not the best option, because if you would decide to sell the property, then you might be disappointed at the price that you will be selling, especially if you want to buy something relatively cheaply. because you can't get cheap real estate in Italy in general, and in southern Italy, let's say anywhere in Italy, it is very expensive. So that anything of value, anything in a good spot, in a nice mid-sized city or town in Italy, is going to be expensive. So that if you bought something which is less than what the market would actually command, then it means that something is off, something is not right. It means that either you are going to be paying a lot of money to renovate or to repair or to whatever it is. It means that you will be completing the market price, maybe with a markup, if you go for a cheaper property, for a cheaper offer. And then you should also think about, okay, what is the demand? Since locally people could be struggling. In other words, and it means that if you want to sell, then you will be waiting until somebody will actually be stepping in, or say if you think that you will be able to rent out a property. That might also be very difficult to achieve. Let's say if you think about let's say Airbnb, rental companies, property management, and I do understand that in the summertime there is, let's say, there are many tourists. Let's say over tourism is a phenomenon. Sicily is on the map. But then when it comes to actually renting a property, we may be underestimating how many competing items are there on the market as well. And maybe a lot of other people have already invested into renovation, into furniture, into whatever, Netflix on the side, or whatever it may be. And that could be at a very competitive price as well. They all want a return on their investment. And it means that even if they would expect, let's say, higher returns, any return is better than say no return. And it means that profit opportunities, after you take into account the taxes, which is about 20% in Italy, and then if you're not let's say, a citizen, a local resident, then the taxes could be higher. And it means that your profit share is going to be like not that high after you, let's say, after you let's say subtract expenses, and then there are probably companies which can actually manage for your property if you're not there yourself, or with the family, or let's say only yourself, which means that is also extra cost. And in some cases, the management company is going to be actually taking only from the profits. But then in other cases, if there's somebody regularly coming in, let's say checking on the property, doing some kind of upkeep, etc., it will mean regular payments, so that you might be paying more than you expected for the management fees, and then you will have initial rental income. And I think this is a scenario which I expect to be repeating itself in many countries, in many settings. There are countries which will have low property prices. And of course, there are a lot of companies or agents doing say investment into some sort of hybrid apartment hotel schemes, essentially, and then those would be competitively priced internationally, so that investors from abroad can see that as an opportunity, especially if you think about how much it will cost you to buy property in a nice town, say in Spain. In northern Spain, it could be very expensive, or let's say if you think about Germany, if you think about, let's say, UK, anywhere else, it will be much more expensive than somewhere, let's say, once again, southern Italy, maybe in Caucasus, maybe let's say elsewhere in Southeast Asia. But it still means that there will be, or there could be, let's say, monthly costs. And then there could be competition for the rental clientele, etc., etc. So that it means that the same applies to Sicily very much, I think. And this is what kind of okay, maybe it is not exactly the type of deal I would want to do in the short term, especially if I'm not necessarily sure this will be a very good use for the funds let's say free up, as opposed to being maybe in capital markets, as opposed to not actually acquiring a property and incurring, let's say, renovation costs, taxation issues. Because it means that if you buy property in Italy, then you will probably need to have a registration. You will be signed a social security number, let's say, or taxation number in Italy. And it means that you will have to be doing a yearly reporting in terms of taxes in Italy. And it means that you will have to have, let's say, a firm doing that for you, an accounting firm. Otherwise, it won't be like really easy to do, especially if it is a foreign country. So it means that you will immediately open up a whole set of costs, liabilities if you buy property in another country, as opposed to not actually going forward, or as opposed to freezing a process, or as opposed to whatever it is. It may be, and I think this is what many people could be underestimating. And I think this is why property, let's say, for €1 are just, let's say, advertisement gimmicks by and large. In other words, I do think that in many cases that is a valid option. Many would say many cities which are depopulating in Sicily do want have an influx of new people, etc., etc. They do need that, and they are very likely acting in good faith. But once again, there is a process, an auctioning process, and then there, of course, it's a higher quality houses which will cost, let's say, not €1, but maybe from €5,000 to maybe 10 or 20,000 euros. And with that, those properties might have, let's say, a better situation in terms of they need to be renovated, or they can have better location, better whatever it is, and that means that you might simply buy and wait for that, and then or move into that, well, let's say at a later date. And then once again, you should think about those older towns as maybe not that car friendly. And it means that, and I've been doing my checks for larger cities in Sicily, such as Shaka, in the southern part of Sicily. And it means that in those towns, you might need to figure out how will you be doing your groceries. If you want a gym, if there is a gym out there, if there is a shop right now, how far it's going to be from where your home will be. Water bills, and Sicily is known for its high water bills, gas, whatever it is, electricity. And with that, if you try to figure out, okay, how much it will cost in terms of the actual say, living there, it could be not exactly say very attractive, especially if you are used to a car or whatever, or more public transport. And then once again, there could be also issues with the criminality. Once again, well, it is a good idea both to learn Italian, at least some very basic stuff, and then to watch some of the series. And let's say those series I've seen on Showtime were scary, guys. I won't lie about that. In other words, those series show civil war situation in some cities, and I believe in the series I've seen a war about Napoli, or it's southern Italy. So that southern Italy is like really troubled. And it means that even though, let's say, I do think that all of the mafia issues are overblown, it is present very likely. It is a traditional society. It is a society which has a lot of family-like structures. And even as a client, let's say if you meet several times, let's say even those who work for you on a contract, there is a relationship. If they treat you slightly more warmly, etc., etc., it means that it will repeat itself in society, and it means that there could be issues with that type of very warm, very sociable environment, which also breeds other types of issues. And it means that if you are, let's say, all alone, and then if you are moving to, let's say, a property sight and seeing, and maybe after ordering a renovation, maybe after visiting you for a day too, and then if you would be actually moving and living there, let's say, think about how much of a challenge it might be in terms of, okay, what happens at night, or what happens, let's say, in general. In other words, when I was looking for property in Palermo, I was really excited about something I found online. It was a small flat, but it was in the area of the train station. And I think that across Europe, train stations are probably hotspots for a lot of things happening let's say in the evening, at night. It could be very criminal infested. It could have violence issues, let's say drunk people, people doing drugs, etc., etc. We don't know exactly. And I think that maybe Palermo is better than its, let's say, its expected reputation can be. But still, even with the property search person, an expert, I was thinking about, let's say, a smaller town not far from Palermo, and it was simply off the map in terms of the social setup. So that some areas are known for the mafia connections, or maybe gang violence, or all this other stuff. So that if you are, let's say, a regular person, a middle class, a regular person from around the world, it means that you will be well advised to hire somebody who knows the local conditions, whatever it costs, because that will save you a lot of issues. So, let's say in Spain, my friend has bought a relatively inexpensive flat, and only after buying that he learned that that building that flat was in had structural issues, which means that he probably has overpaid, and he might be facing some extra costs for repair, for support of the building, etc., etc. So that means that if you don't know where you're walking into, even if you have a sense that you know the country more or less, that won't save you. So that somebody who is an expert is going to be like a real help throughout, and in terms of your safety, in terms of the property quality, let's say, or let's say issues which you might not think of as important, such as on a daily list. You will always see Asta properties. Asta means that up until the judgment, basically some of the properties are repossessed in some way or another. They basically taken from their rightful owners due to debts or whatever, legal costs or whatever it is. So that means that if you are buying the property right off that kind of auctioning process, and it is a good deal, they say usually that also might mean that there could be let's say unhappy former residents. There could be issues with the neighbors. There could be simple, let's say unpleasantness. That you will be buying somebody else's home. Somebody has lost a home, and they are not really happy about that, and it is it. So that you could be in for more than you bargained for in terms of, let's say, your share of issues or problems, especially if it is somebody else's home and it has old furniture. There's issues maybe with plumbing, etc., etc. So that if you do a renovation, so it means that you pay for a lot of things in the process, and it means that it is all on you. And basically, unless you move there to live, it means that your bank accounts are going to be cleaned up. They're significantly only, let's say, only to be able to get to the point when you can move in, when you have properly done renovation, where you have some sort of furniture installed, etc., etc., and it will all be, let's say, relatively expensive. Let's say, especially when it's like a city which is somewhere far off in Sicily. It means that if you order furniture, it will be brought specially. If you order installation, it will probably be done specially for you, etc., etc. I'm not saying anything bad about local people on the ground, and I'm sure that those who do, let's say, a very good job at a very good price, but you cannot really offset that. It means that you will be waiting and renting up until you can, let's say, move in, and then you could be doing it at let's say, at a higher cost point than if you were doing it somewhere closer to, let's say, where things are in terms of infrastructure, in terms of, let's say, railways, in terms of, let's say, etc., etc. In other words, this is also what was front and center for me when I was trying to figure, okay, how many buses are there? If you want to go to Palermo, if you, let's say, want to go elsewhere in Sicily, is there a train station in the city or town, etc., etc. So that all of those smaller issues do tend to be overlooked, especially if you are thinking about, let's say, less expensive properties. But then once you, let's say, once you factor that in, that means that you will be paying more, maybe in terms of wait time for the next bus, or let's say other things. So let's say a good quality dentist, it is probably not exactly something that you can expect in a very small village. Now, it means that any dental work will have to be done in the nearby, let's say, a town, or even in Palermo, where you have, say, a wider choice, or a high quality service, etc. So that it means that if you go for something like Sicily, that could be a big adventure. Once again, if you like adventures, this is something I really advise on. But then you should also be, let's say, thinking whether you can afford it up front. Let's say how much it would be to take out a loan, how much it will cost in interest, etc. And I think that for me as well, it was a major point, since I thought also about, let's say, whether I will be able to take out a loan locally. And usually you should think, but then again, you should think about interest rates, monthly payments, etc., etc., and how much of let's say, weight it can be economically on you, especially say, it will depend on your economic situation. Are you well off? Do you have, say, very sufficient money in the bank? Do you have regular income streams, etc., etc., which you can then maybe dedicate to paying, let's say, other local taxes, or let's say, payments of the loan or mortgage, etc., so that it all comes down to whether it is a good economic proposition, regardless of the price point of the initial purchase. And I think this is not always as good as it seems on the first glance, and then you always have to have maybe also an accountant, a financial advisor separately, analyzing whether that is a good option, or maybe even, let's say, maybe you should talk to Chat GPT, ask it whether you think it will say whether it thinks this is going to be a good option. And sometimes ChatGPT is as good as an advisor you can think of, to be honest, or at least it could be a very good starting point for whatever you think you might do next. And I think, well, especially with how good it can be in terms of its advice quality, especially the first cut, and especially given that in most cases most people don't really pay attention to a lot of aspects. And I think once again, Sicily is a great place, I think, to visit on a trip, on a tourist visit. But then again, you should ask yourself, do you think that it will be a good long term option, especially given, let's say, maybe you might like art, you might like, let's say, bar life, or whatever it is, other than, let's say, cheap rent or cheap property price. And it means that you will have to factor in whether you will like it on a long-term basis and whether you will be able to rent it out even on there and how much it will cost. Do the management, let's say, headache, etc. And it could be not worth it, or it could be worth later in time when you maybe have more of a clear sense of your larger scale strategy. Maybe, let's say, YouTube channel about living the life of a one euro house owner in Italy. Let's say how much it costs you to do that. Let's say what life is it locally, etc., etc. So that once somebody has a business plan, essentially, for that, then it could be a good idea without a business plan, or maybe without well qualified advice on the financials, as well on, let's say, as well as on the legal aspects of that. It is not necessarily a good option, so that it is something that may be a good idea, but not always so.